Good morning. This is Kevin Kirkpatrick from Avery Professional Group. My guest today is Dave Vu from Ribbon.ai, and we're going to chat about Ribbon and stuff like that. So, um, Dave and I have been going back and forth about Ribbon.ai and the ability to utilize AI for screening candidates. And one of the things that I thought of is in healthcare, we get sometimes for some roles we get a lot of candidates, and then we're hamstrung by time in an effort to try and screen them and decide who we're coming through for interviews. Whereas that leaves a lot of candidates that get no touch points. They get no response. Nothing happens to them. So as far as they're concerned, their resume's gone into the black hole. One of the things I've thought of is that if you've got 20 applicants but don't have time to screen all 20, you know, there's a consistent way of utilizing their tool in AI to screen the 20 so that they feel like they've at least had a chance to talk about themselves. They've at least had a chance to, to showcase their skills beyond just a resume. So candid engagement, I think, would be better. So, Dave, talk to me a bit about you, your background, how you got here, and then a bit about Ribbon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kevin. So I've been doing hiring and recruiting in a variety of different capacity for probably about close to 14 years now. Worked on an agency side of things, worked in-house, even worked as in the talent team in a portfolio VC company as well. So, and I'm just sending it out as context to give people an understanding of my background, my experience, and seeing this in a variety of different angles and capacity. And the challenge that I kept seeing coming up over and over again was, how do we get the best candidate to connect with the hiring manager and recruiter, and how do we cut down on that time? And in a world today where, one click apply is typically the norm, and so you get people that are mass applying across the board, with not even a care and a thought in terms of what they're applying to. The sheer number of applicants have increased, I'm sure 4 to 5 times than ever before. Mobility, people are moving around a lot more. Remote work's becoming a norm. I think all those things are posing to be a challenge, and that's why we set out to solve that problem with Ribbon.ai.
Awesome. Now, the first aspect that I think that I thought of when we first started talking was, how formal is this process or informal, and what is it like from a candidate experience? Like, can you talk a bit about what a candidate would go through in the process?
Absolutely. A candidate, like, the idea is, or we want to mimic and simulate what a conversation with a recruiter would be, but give that accessibility to that individual. And what I mean by that is, there's so many times where a candidate sees a job description online, right? Gets really interested, applies, and then doesn't hear back from anybody for a really long time, right? And that's normal because of the scheduling issues, going back and forth and things like that. Imagine you can capture that enthusiasm at that moment that candidate is interested, to have them screen themselves. And now there's an opportunity for them to click on the simple link that we create, and part of our product is really to be able to create a really customized, simple link of an AI recruiter that can be embedded in a job description, at the end of a newsletter, a blog, a social media post. It doesn't really matter where you're attracting and engaging with the candidate themselves. It's just a unique link. You write a little copy to say, we have this new innovative approach. We treasure your time. We want to get you screened right away by the AI. Click here and get started. And that's it. And the individual clicks on the link, and then there's a couple simple steps that just gets them prepared for the actual interview. There's a countdown for the candidate. Candidate jumps on and then starts engaging with the AI. And the AI starts asking the questions that you set out for the candidate. And then it probes you. It digs a little deeper in each one of those questions for the recruiter, and then captures all the information and passes on to the hiring manager and the recruiting team.
Awesome. And it's interesting for me because I think that so I used to work for a couple of large hospitals, and nursing was an interesting one, right? Because sometimes we'd get 30 applicants, um, and there was a lot of screening that necessarily had to happen, and the notion of screening all 30, let's say, even though you're going to hire one, right? If I have a good applicant tracking system that's integrated with this, I can store that interview. So what happens is the next time around, if I'm going external and don't have to follow collective agreement rules, I can go through that. And you know, rather than start over, I mean, I've got a leg up, right? So I think there's this, it's almost like creating a relationship that's beyond just the notion of a paper flat file that's stuck in your ATS, right? So you can see how well somebody presents, you can see how well they answer questions, and you can understand them better. So you're almost adding value to your ATS at the same time, because you're not just storing notes, you're storing interactions that allow you to go back and look at it later and stuff like that. So it's interesting. And you guys integrate with some ATSs, do you not?
Yeah, so we do. So we integrate with all the top ATS out there, but we also can custom integrate for you if you have an ATS that you're using that is of importance to you. We're also a standalone solution, so we have companies that don't have an ATS, and they said, "Well, this is great. Can I just use this out of the box?" You totally can do that as well. And so we built all that with the recruiter and hiring manager in mind to make the whole flow and process as seamless as possible. I want to go back to a couple of points you just made there. One thing that I heard, and this is a lot of anecdote that we took from candidates, is they love the accessibility component for them. And I think nursing is a great example. We have roles with other customers where the candidate themselves are on the floor, they're working their shift. They're not going to be able to interact with that recruiter on a regular work hour. They
Hmm.
typically will be able to do that, 11 p.m. at night, for example, after they put the kids down, they came back from a long shift, whatever the case may be. We want to give that fairness to them, the accessibility, the ability for them to be able to showcase themselves more than just a resume. And the candidates, the feedback we're getting from candidates is they love that piece
Yeah.
tremendously, right?
Yeah, well, I think about my work. Like I work entirely with physicians, and I mean I do more phone calls during the day. I can text,
Yep.
right? Because they can text what in between things that they're doing, but you can't. It's hard to have a conversation, right? And then it's like, okay, well, next Thursday I'm off, and can we do that? Or it's an evening or a weekend, which all of those scheduling things delay it, right? And that's like I found when I worked for Humber River Hospital, I did mostly management vacancies, and trying to get a panel together, right? And then trying to mirror that panel's availability to a candidate was a nightmare. So things that should have taken a week or two took 6 weeks because of availability, right? And the other piece is that um, the thing I think I like is consistency, right? Because the AI is going to adapt, but the questions are the same, right? So it provides a certain equity to the way it's done. AIs that I mean I haven't dived into this, but I don't know what the biases of AI are, if there are any. So there's a lot of different benefits to it as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, like the thing I used to run like recruiting teams. I would notice that the notes get worse and worse throughout the week,
Yeah.
and the fatigue kicks in, right? And that's normal because if you're running a search and you have to talk to, let's assume every half hour you're talking to one person, you're talking to, let's say, 15 plus people per day. By Friday, if you're the 4 p.m. slot, you're not getting the best conversation from that recruiter,
Yeah.
and that's not that recruiter's fault. It's just the sheer fatigue kicks in. The other thing
Yeah.
I think you mentioned is the bias piece, is that we're able to surface all this information up. We have this misconception that the AI is going to be biased. Well, that's only if the AI is making the decision. If the AI is working as a detective and trying to gather as much data for you, Kevin, or whoever is doing the hiring, all we're doing is just surfacing all this information up, asking probing questions, and then it's really up to you to make the decision. And so for me, having that ability to surface all the information uh, allows less bias, because now we can hear what a conversation sounds and looks like as a
Hmm.
team, rather than a private conversation between the recruiter and the individual. And you never know what the recruiter might feel about that individual, but now all the data is right in front of you.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. Like the when I was at Humber, I had 5 recruiters,
Wow.
and each recruiter had about 70 vacancies,
Wow.
right? So, some of them were internal and had to, it was more of a labor relations process. But often what would happen is there was less potential to to go out and talk to candidates because you just didn't have time, right? So now I like the idea of using a tool to direct outreach, let's say, and including an interview process in it. So, and if you start your interaction with a description of the job
Yeah.
and then go into it, you're almost having that initial conversation, getting engagement from the onset, that you wouldn't get because you're someone's going to have to reply to your email, then they're going to have to schedule a time to talk to you. Like it works at that speed. And I really, for healthcare, when people work 24/7, having that ability to go to your phone, on lunch in the garage and go through it at that point, or do it after your kids are in bed, or after you've your shift, allows you that flexibility without it being a case of where a recruiter's got to be on 24/7, right? And that's like, I in my life, because so many of my clients and candidates um, are caught outside of work hours. Like, I'd say 3 out of 5 nights a week I work,
Yeah.
and probably at least one day, Saturday or Sunday every week, I'm taking calls.
Yeah.
Luckily, they're mostly calls, and I don't need to be in front of a computer.
Yeah.
But then what happens is I'm not getting the same capture of that conversation as I would in this, right? Because if I'm in my car, driving my kids to school, and I do a phone call, well, I'm not making notes,
Yeah. That's right.
right?
That's right.
And
I hope you're
when
not.
we
I hope you're
no,
not
I
in case,
for
case for accidents.
if the Clarington Police, Durham Regional Police, or OPP are listening, I do not take notes while driving.
That's right.
No, and it's like, so the challenge is like, you're either going to record every phone call and then have to worry about getting it transcribed and all of that other stuff, or you can use something like this and say, you know what, like, I'm going to send you uh, a link to an AI that is going to help me understand you. And I'm not saying replace human interaction,
Yeah.
right? Because I think that's a key part in the recruitment process. But if I can create an interaction and an information share with more people, then lo and behold, right? Because, like, HR jobs, for instance, right? Like, every HR job I've ever posted, I've had 50 or more applicants,
Yes.
right? And what happens is you're then reliant on a resume to determine who you want to progress with, right?
And
Whereas,
and we know that the resume doesn't tell the whole story, and that's even worse,
no,
right? So
no,
you're
exactly. And
judging somebody on a very small amount of
yeah,
data.
and then you're deciding who to invest your time in. Whereas if you can send those 50 people, now it's going to take a lot of time to go through it, but if you can send those 50 people, you're not choosing based on just paper, right? And some jobs, I think, are so ambiguous that it's hard to put on paper what truly represents who you are as an individual, right? And I've always said, I've had people tell me my resume's terrible,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah.
But every job I've interviewed for, I think I've gotten. I don't
Mm.
recall ever interviewing for a job and not getting it.
Yeah.
So I got a terrible resume. But if I can get on an AI chatbot and have a conversation, answer questions, show my personality, show my expertise, then it goes a long way, right? Like, that's why people do social media, right? Is because it shows more of who they are than just a piece of paper or a static site, right?
I mean, you and I both know, like, how many times do you hire based on a resume, right? You typically hire when you engage with an individual, ask
Hmm.
deep questions, and then you get this context, this additional context that you never get
Yeah.
in a resume. And the resume, it's a very good marketing tool, but a lot of times we're told resume needs to be one pager because nobody's going to read the
Yeah.
rest. And like, if that's the case, I'm not really like, if somebody with 14 years of experience or lots of experience, you're not cramming everything in. You're using maybe one bullet point to highlight one thing and you're
Yeah.
eliminating something else.
Yeah.
And that doesn't do yourself that justice. And the beauty of the AI these days is not just a one-way conversation. The AI actually engages with the candidate as well.
Yeah.
So as you feed the AI in with your job description, it's able to um, answer questions for the individual, and so it makes
Yeah.
them feel that much more comfortable in the role. One
Yeah.
part,
What
yeah,
the other thing I was going to say is I've heard of. I was on an HR telecom webinar,
yeah,
well, like a Zoom meeting with a bunch of HR people, and people are they're telling like people are using AI for resumes and
yeah,
stuff like that, right? So what that's going to do is that's going to take away the validity of a resume if OpenAI Chat GPT-4 is doing
yeah,
everybody's resumes, right? And like I did a resume review for a doc last week, and I'm not gonna lie, I used Chat GPT to help pull out some context, but I used it more as a research tool
yeah,
to learn things that I don't know because I'm not the physician. But I then sent it back to the physician saying, "Okay, you need to add the context. You need to add more information. Like this is a framework,
yeah,
right? More of a format than anything else." And and I use ChatGPT for research all the time, right? Like if I'm trying to prove a point and I want statistics, I use ChatGPT for to
yeah,
pull up those statistics, right? Um, so as we use more and more of this, um, it's going to put an emphasis on the interpersonal side of it even more, right? Because resumes start looking the same, right? And people out there, everybody talks about the two pager, right? Like I've been recruiting for 25 years and across 7 or 8 different industries. So how am I fitting that on 2 pages,
yeah. That's right.
right? and
Yeah,
and how do you put like the strategic stuff like the manpower planning
yeah.
and the job creation and engagement and all that other stuff that I've done? You can't fit that on a resume,
Or like,
right?
or you work on a project and you want to give the context of what that project is like.
Yeah,
You're not gonna dump that into a resume, or
yeah,
it's gonna typically come out of a conversation. And so
yeah,
you're absolutely right. I think that's where AI can accelerate that, capture that, and surface those great information to
yeah.
you as a hiring manager, recruiter faster.
Yeah, and I think like with some of these HR jobs I posted where you got 50 people, like I always hired somebody and I had a bit of regret because not because they weren't great, because the people that we hired when I was there were all amazing
Yeah,
and they had an amazing team. But you're like, am I missing out on anybody?
yeah,
Right? And moreover, am I missing out on somebody that should be my next hire?
yeah.
Right? So, when recruiting departments are jammed packed
Mm,
because they're under resourced half the time, especially in healthcare, right? Like health, I don't know of a single healthcare organization that's got too many recruiters.
yeah,
So when your time is limited, and like if you've got 70 vacancies, that doesn't even give you an hour a week for a job,
yeah,
right? So that time's got to come from somewhere. And what happens is you start being more administrative and less
yeah.
innovative, right? And
Transactional, right?
yeah, you're so transactional. And the recruiting function and why I've never gone into HR and stayed in recruiting for 25 years is that it is the vibe, right? It's the getting to know the people, it's getting to know the industry, getting to know the market. And the more information you can pull into yourself and to your organization, the better you can adapt your market. So, this gives you the opportunity to essentially talk to more people
Yeah,
and find out what's going on more than anything else, right? Like I talked to a lady yesterday who gave me some great information on one of my clients, um, their reputation in a certain market, right?
yeah,
And I called her because I had half an hour and I wanted to talk to somebody, so I called her and if I had interviewed her, I would have gotten that information too, right? So it's like the more you talk to people, the more you can adapt to your process, adapt to what you do,
yeah.
and this gives you that opportunity to do it, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You make some really good points where, having that ability to build that relationship with the right people is really the
Hmm.
name of the game, right? And
Yeah,
so, but the problem is these days, as you know, if you have 70, like your example you use, you have 70 roles, you're probably just trying to get through 70 as fast as you can. You're not really thinking about that superpower that you would have is building that relationship, right?
yeah,
So imagine you were able to build a relationship, get the individual to get excited, And then after that, building an initial relationship where you're not even technically selling about the role, you say, hey, listen, if I have something that might be a good fit for you, we can, I'll send you some information plus a link for you to get screened at your own time. If you sleep on it and you're actually interested, go through that process, and then I'll get back to you afterwards. Imagine that was the flow, and now
Yeah.
all you're doing is just setting up, building up those relationships with people that
Yes.
it's great, and then now you can spend more time with the other people that you think are the best people for you to
Well,
kind
and I think about, like, it's interesting because each of the three hospitals I worked at, each one was different, so they each had different challenges. But one of the challenges I often found was in non-clinical areas, right?
of.
Like take materials management, right? You're not always recruiting in materials management, right? So every time you recruit, you're almost like starting from scratch, right?
Yeah,
Whereas if you use if you used Ribbon, you could literally go back to the people you interviewed last time and see if there's anybody there that
yeah,
you want to bring back,
yeah,
right? And I just think of it's more like candidate community relations, right? Because the more value you have in your information and in your community, the more that relationship can grow, right? And it's like, hey, you know what? I talked to this person last month for a job. They weren't available for an interview, um, or they weren't available. But 2 months from now, I can reach back out to them and say, hey, listen. And imagine that reach out, right? Like, hey, Dave, I know last month you did an AI interview for me. I really liked it. What do you think about this?
yes,
That's so different than, hey, Dave, it's Kevin. Just wondering if we could talk about your background,
yeah,
right? Like, it's such like, and this is often and this is why I like your tech more than most of the tech that I get approached by, right? It's like, which is ironic because it's AI, but it's
yeah,
AI building more relationships
yeah.
and less about, this really cool tech that's going to do work for me. It's like,
It's
it's
freeing
gonna
up time. It's freeing up
it's
time for you.
but it but that's maybe that's your sales point to a group of recruiters. But to me, the sales point is you're elevating those relationships by
Yeah,
learning more about more people,
yeah,
right? So you've got the ability to utilize candidates multiple times, or and stuff like that, because I've talked to people and placed them a year later, right? And because I had a conversation with them. So
yeah,
imagine having that conversation residing right in your ATS and being able to draw on that, right?
yeah,
Like, it's I think there's a huge benefit to the ability to create more community, more things. And the other piece is, as a candidate, sure, we want to talk to a recruiter and the hiring manager, but if the alternative is my resume goes into a black hole versus I do an AI interview
I
and
hear it
I
all
get
the time. I hear
and I
that.
get to actually talk about what I do
Yeah,
and build that relationship and share
yes,
more information, the greater my chance of building a relationship with that organization and getting hired,
that's right.
right?
Yeah,
Because if the alternative is, you know what, I'm gonna interview 3 of 20, well, now I'm gonna interview 20 of 20, and
yeah,
I'm picking the best,
yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
So,
I think you hit on all the really important points. And I think that's where the future is going, right? Like if you think about it, like that's where the flow, as exactly how you describe, is going to become more the norm. Because I think in a world where, again, I go back to, you know, more applications than ever before, people are moving around a lot more,
yeah,
contract work and remote work and all this other stuff is like the norm now, right? Post
yeah,
COVID. Then it's a challenge on both sides because like there's a cat and mouse game where the candidate's trying to stand out as much as you can, and the hiring manager is getting an absorbent amount of applicants. Like, how do we bridge that gap? And
yeah.
so,
Well, and I just think it allows you to expand on the relationship, much better, right? Because I get people that send me a link in LinkedIn and say, "Hey, I saw this job. Can we talk?" And I'm like, I don't have time to talk to you
yeah, he's right. Yeah, unfortunately,
because I don't know what it's about, or I don't have time to do that investigation.
yeah,
But if I can send that, right? Or imagine being able to create a newsletter with all of your open jobs with a link underneath them that people can be like, "Oh, I'm interested in this,"
yeah,
right? And and have that conversation. It's like we it's like that notion that people were years ago were like video resumes are the next thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, and but it was one of those things like you can't, sending a video through email, you're going to clog the email server, right? Or it's to a link. And it's funny because I send voice notes to people. I send and all the time because you want that communication and you want that sense of like commitment to the person, right? As opposed to this notion of, oh, here's a link, right? It drives me nuts, right?
Yeah.
You reach out to somebody and they're like, oh, here's a link to apply, and then you never hear
Never
from them,
hear from them. Yeah,
right?
I think the black hole concept that you mentioned is a real problem, a real thing, and candidates say that all the time, and they feel that way. It's the
Well,
worst feeling, like you're applying to jobs and you don't feel like when you apply and you're already disheartened by the fact that nobody's gonna to look or read it. It's a really bad feeling, right?
yeah.
So
Well, and I think the other thing that I think of too is that it's so easy to apply, right? Like you
yeah,
literally have a resume, you send the email, you click it, and then away you go, and it's easy to apply. But the other thing to think about is you can gauge candidate engagement by
yes,
whether they go through this process as well,
agree.
right? Like I used to joke that if I applied for a job and sent a resume, I probably didn't want the job anyways, right? Because if
Yes.
I wanted a job, I'm going to call the person and invest the time and energy into trying to introduce myself and network into the job, right? So, in this scenario, you're asking someone to take time easily,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah.
again, it's just
It's a
it
slight
adds.
barrier, but enough to signal if you're interested or not in that sense.
Now, how do you deal with people that might have disabilities and stuff like that?
Yeah. So you mean like in terms of
So let's say someone has visual impairment or hearing impairment. Is there a solution for that in the system?
yeah, we're working on something. I don't want to like unveil it now, but we are
Okay.
working on something. The other thing that we're noticing from our customers is it's not like the option's taken away from them. They always give that additional option to say, listen, like if you want to get screened and you don't want to hear from us and you do at your own time, here's the link and get screened. But if you have an impairment or something that you need to engage in a different way, most companies will be very accommodating in that
Yeah.
sense as well. So I
Yeah.
think that doesn't even have to do with anything with tech, but it's more realizing that you're giving people options, right? But
Yeah.
you'll see that most people will take the in the world where people are moving around so fast, they rather take the easier option for themselves.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to a point you made about like the you said about video resume was going to take over. Video resume had a great concept. The flaw to that was how many times have you tried doing a video and you had to do like 13 takes or 50
Yeah.
takes to get it right? And it also doesn't feel natural because it feels like I'm being Barbara Walters and I'm reading a script and I'm just
Yeah.
presenting myself, right? Whereas this, like I said, is more of an engagement. You can ask any question. You can stumble and it's okay. You're meant to just be spending time with AI. AI is asking questions. You get comfortable by asking questions of the role itself, and that's it. So there's no like stress or pressure to look a certain way, say it in a certain way. And also with our platform, you can do it via video if you want as an option, or you can do it on voice.
Yeah.
And we give that ability to the hiring manager and recruiter where they'll set that a requirement. If they really want to make that requirement barrier even a little bit higher, they can set as video for certain
Yeah.
roles. If not, then they can put it as a voice.
Nice. Well, and I think I don't know, man. I think the big thing for me that with this is the quality of relationships. And
Yeah,
I'm not a high volume guy. Like I don't hire 20 people a month or anything like that. So,
yeah,
for me it's really about trying to have quality interactions.
yeah,
And sometimes I struggle during the week because I'm so busy that, you talk to somebody and you're like, okay, I've got like 15 minutes, right? And then at the end of the 15 minutes, it's like you're either going to be late for your next meeting or you gotta close it down. Whereas I think this allows you to invest, or allows AI to allow for the time to be invested in doing it properly, right? Because if it takes an hour, it's not like I'm having to cancel two meetings
yeah.
to do it, or I'm not having to cut things short. And I just think, I've gone into this space of doing mostly physician executives lately, right? So it's a much longer conversation and in depth. So, the notion of going from, like 20 people that you're talking to, and to identify the 5 people that you want to talk to live or bring in for panels or whatever, like it just allows you to understand people better, which I think is the key. And everybody talks about recruiters getting replaced with AI and all this other stuff, but I honestly think the value of it is going to be enabling the recruiters to make better decisions,
I agree.
and allowing the recruiters to build better relationships.
I agree.
Because the value of the recruiters that I always tried to instill in my team was, I want you to be an expert, right? I want you to be a consultant to the organization on how to get people in the building working, not just how to manage LinkedIn Sales Navigator or LinkedIn Recruiter and stuff like that, right? I want quality, and I want that communication and conversation. And even though this might seem like the opposite step, it's not. It's actually developing better relationships, because you're giving people the time and attention to talk about themselves that they're not going to get otherwise.
I agree. And I think the key word you mentioned there was quality. I think
Yeah.
like you and I both know it's, quality is really the aim. And so if you can have more quality conversation and surface that up, then you're already winning in your role, right? So
Yeah. Well, if you get 10 applicants to a role, and they look good,
yeah.
it could take an entire week just to get through those 10.
Oh yeah.
Or it can take a few days of them doing it themselves. Like, it's brilliant. I love the idea. I think I can, part of the reason for doing today's session was because all of the hospitals and healthcare people in my network, like I would love to see them start leveraging this, right? So, like, even high volumes, when you're hiring a lot of RPNs and PSWs and healthcare aides and stuff like that, like, it's an opportunity to really screen and understand people's social abilities as well, right? Because you're dealing with vulnerable populations and stuff like that, right? And it's a way of of understanding them and stuff like that, right? So I think that's great. I think it's awesome. And I appreciate, I want to be mindful of your time and stuff like that, because I think it's been a great conversation. And how can people find you?
Yeah, people can find me and the company on our website. So ribbon.ai. So you just go to the site, click on it. There's a contact section. You can get started on a free trial as well on your plan. But reach out to me. Find me on LinkedIn. I think you can drop my link if you want. In my profile, it's already in this conversation as well. And then people can reach out to me via email at dave@ribbon.ai as well.
Awesome. Well, listen, I appreciate that. And I'm still waiting on a client, because I'm going to do a good trial of this and see
Nice.
if I can implement it in my processes as well. So thank you for your time, and I have a great rest of your day.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Kevin. It was a great opportunity to chat with your network to showcase what we can do here. And I'd love to jump back on in the future. If you have any other topics that you think we should talk about, love to do it
Sounds
again.
good, man. Sounds
All
good,
right.
buddy. All right. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.